And I would also like to acknowledge Puan Shazliati Ibrahim, Puan Jacqueline Chua, and also Dr. Noshawani Manso, the convener and chairpersons, people of the ICMAL 2023 and committee members. And of course, very important, the fellow paper presenters and all of you conference delegate. First, let me thank the organizers for the kind invitation to be part of ICMAL 2023. May I also commend you on the choice of location for the conference on this beautiful island, beautiful serene island, Pulau Seribu Masjid, Nusantara Barat. Yeah. So the theme, of course, is a very appropriate theme, acclimatizing language teaching and learning in the post-pandemic landscape. The qualifier, post-pandemic, has been used recently, well, in many conferences, and I would note the one in the New Directions by British Council, a series of talks, rethinking language teacher education and alternative assessment in post-pandemic times. And of course, at the University of Michigan, they have the series of talk on language assessment. Again, the theme is regards to post-pandemic needs. In fact, the topic is so pertinent to address issues related to the post-pandemic language teaching and learning that in the European Union, the Council of Europe, through the European Centre for Modern Languages, has commissioned a report on rethinking language education after the experience of COVID. The final report, which was released 2 months ago in April 2023. And I would recommend that for language teachers and people in the language profession actually read this report. It's downloadable from that website. Let me quote from the foreword of the final report because it resonates with our conference today. In March 2020, the world as we knew it seemed to come to a standstill. Predictability and routines were replaced by uncertainty and fear. Knowledge and skills developed over a lifetime, at least for myself and also Prof. Ruzi, no longer seem to serve us so well in this eerie new context. Things we had taken for granted were brought into questions, and carefully laid plans, the 14 weeks, the terms, and so on, were thrown out the window, which was now open for increasingly long periods during the day, and we were incarcerated in our homes. We wondered whether we would ever get back to our previous lives and why we had ever complained about them in the first place. When we did dare to switch on the media, we were confronted with only depressing headlines. We waited and hoped, not really knowing what that might be or how long it could take. So we comforted ourselves that no matter which part of the world we lived in, we were now all in the same boat. Were we? Well, not really. The injustices and inequalities were only amplified for the not so well off, often confined to cramped accommodation and needing to share the means and technology to access and communicate with the outside world. So we have heard of stories where a family of 3 kids sharing one laptop or using their mother's handphone during that period of time. So school buildings, of course, remain quiet and empty, devoid of life and energy, which had once made them special and sometimes at least joyful places. And yet, in this strange atmosphere behind the scene, human creativity was sparking into action. Suddenly, technology, which had sometimes been regarded as the preserves of specialists and avoided by those who felt ill prepared, was not only easily accessible, but enabled us to do things in different ways and sometimes in better ways. So, by adapting and daring to be adventurous, we found we were able to achieve results we didn't think were possible. We shared our experience of what worked well and perhaps not so well with others. We were also inspired by others' successes and not so afraid of failure, which could always be blamed on the technology or the unfamiliar situation we were facing. Yet, it is only by looking back that we can hope to move forward. Now is exactly the time when we should look back and reflect on what we have achieved and what we can learn from this painful chapter in our lives. 2 years, I think we lost 2 years, right? So that when the next crisis inevitably arises, we not only struggle through, but tackle it with confidence and aspire to emerge stronger as a result. Hence, your conference, ICMAL, ICMAL 2023, on acclimatizing language teaching and learning in the post-pandemic landscape, I believe not only offers a reflection of the challenges faced and the approaches developed over the course of the pandemic, but also a look into the future at ways in which the skills and insights gained may bring about beneficial, lasting changes in our profession of teaching and learning of languages. Now, as an aside, from the 50 over topics presented, about 30%, 30% of them actually was related to some aspect of post-pandemic language teaching and learning, which is very interesting. So in my talk today, I will argue that the pandemic that has brought about many changes in language learning and teaching, but these changes are not new. In fact, we have used many of these words. Chua's paper on blended learning, I particularly enjoyed. And there are actually 5 terms that I would associate with the post-pandemic learning and teaching. First of all, hybrid learning and blended learning. And then there is adaptive assessment and also technology-enhanced learning from our plenary paper on GPT this morning, Professor Anelka's paper. In fact, she raised this as early as 2018 in a paper on Education 4.0, which I again recommend that you read. And also a keyword here is autonomous learning. So these are the 5 terms, I believe, that are very relevant to us in a post-pandemic landscape. I will actually try to touch on all of these except for the adaptive assessment. But we know that the pandemic has led us to make a lot of adjustment in the way that we assess, especially during the time of ODL or when we were all locked down. In-person exams and assessment face challenges due to the shift to online learning. So we need words like proctoring for the first time. Words like proctoring for the first time. Language alternative assessment strategies. We had, of course, been familiar with online quizzes, assignments. Now we have students send us video projects and so on. So this adaptation actually aims to ensure fair and accurate evaluation of student language proficiency. Now, this was during the pandemic. Of course, when we move post-pandemic, do we go back to our old ways or do we actually continue to assess students in these adaptive, interesting new ways? So let me begin by looking at one of the concepts. I think there are a few papers on this as well in the conference here. Again, I am not an expert in terms of hybrid learning. I have to admit that. Most of you will know me as a semanticist or a corpus linguist. Some of you have taken my classes in semantics either at UIA or at UKM. So the concept of hybrid learning or blended learning, which combines online and face-to-face instruction, has been discussed and implemented for quite some time, even before the pandemic, and is often associated with the ICT revolution. While it is challenging to pinpoint an exact date of its first mention, hybrid learning approaches started gaining attention and popularity in the field of education and language learning in the early 2000s, almost 2 decades before the COVID hit us. Prior to the pandemic, the rapid development or rapid advancement of technology and the internet provided new opportunities for incorporating online components into traditional classroom-based instruction. This morning, I was informed that in 2013, hybrid or blended learning was first introduced in UITM. So that was almost, 10 years ago, a decade before the pandemic hit us. So this has led to the exploration of blended learning or hybrid learning models in various educational contexts, including language learning. Yeah. Now, in Malaysia, a lot of you have seen this slide before. We have heard of the Malaysian Smart School Initiative, 1999. I know some of you were just born then, or not born yet, right? But actually, it already began in 1999. The blueprint was first introduced in 1999. We are aware that the MSSI, or the Malaysian Smart School Initiative, was developed and implemented in several phases, beginning in 1999, with the objective of incorporating the use of ICT in Malaysian school through a holistic approach, involving not only the use of ICT in the teaching and learning process, but also in the administration and management of schools. So personally, I was involved in 1999 right up to 2003 with Telecom Smart School Initiative by being one of those content providers. UKM had the project to provide the English language. At that time we were using, big because the language was just not much enough. Now, because of the smart school initiative, generally Malaysians or Malaysian learners are well equipped to make the transition to blended and hybrid learning. And this, of course, as in 2006, there was already an impact assessment after 5 years, 6 years of implementing the SSI. But of course, all of us will agree, we have heard horror stories of the Malaysian Smart School Initiative, yeah, especially in the rural schools, where again, the digital inequality, digital divide actually prohibits some of the schools from actually making full use of the SSI. Of course, in a lot of urban area, the SSI can be fully implemented, except for one crucial factor, the training of the teachers themselves. So, but in 2006, Frost and Sullivan were asked to make an impact assessment on this particular SSI implementation in Malaysia. And this was their finding. 90% of students demonstrated sufficient ICT, or what we call digital literacy, for learning. This is 90%. So in other words, some of our students who have grown up, the Gen Z, they are actually more digitally literate than some of their teachers. Yeah, they could do more. They are more, because that is how they have grown up. That's how they have learned. 90% of students demonstrated sufficient digital literacy for learning. Less than 50% of students were unable to conduct independent self-learning due to limitation in access to facilities and content. 82.5% of teachers felt that their ICT competency had been positively impacted by SSIS. At that time, in fact, some schools already bought a lot of laptops for teachers to use. So if you go to a classroom, whether it's science or language, teachers would be using their PowerPoints and using the CD-ROMs material. 90% of teachers were using the computer laboratories for lesson and preparations of materials. 73% of teachers noted their productivity had improved using ICT. 90% of information technology coordinators were technically competent. However, a caveat here is that productivity was impacted by or in schools that were poorly equipped, schools or areas that were poorly equipped. So the reason why I'm presenting this data is to stress that as early as 2006, 14 years before the pandemic hit us, there was a high degree of ICT readiness among Malaysians. Hence, in 2020, when the pandemic hit our learners or hit the world, our students could embrace technology, enhanced learning quite naturally. Having said this, of course, we are aware that there are issues of inequality and access to the technology, namely the digital divide, which currently we are trying to address very seriously, address that, especially in the rural areas in Sabah and Sarawak. So back to the notion of hybrid learning. So hybrid learning itself may not have been commonly used initially, but the concept of combining online and face-to-face elements, including TV pendidikan. Remember that? Yeah. So what we had to do was just bring back TV pendidikan to the classroom when the pandemic hit us to enhance language learning, and has, however, become increasingly prevalent in language learning and teaching in Malaysia, particularly with the widespread availability of digital resources, learning management systems, and communication tools that facilitate online learning components alongside the traditional classroom interaction. So it is foreseeable that in the post-pandemic landscape, blended hybrid learning will be the new normal, if it is not already the new normal. And as teachers and administrator, the dean of your language academy is here, we must ensure that our curriculum actually structure, support system follows, not only embrace, but treat hybridity as the norm. So just now, I was glad to speak to our UITM colleague, because they had 2 hours online, 2 hours face-to-face, instead of previously 6 hours face-to-face, and then you have all this material online which students do at their own time. But the curriculum of a 2 hours face-to-face, 2 hour online independent learning has to really be thought out well. So we have one approach which is using the Gagne, depending on whether you're French or English, right? Okay. But there are several approaches to blended learning. And of course, the role of the teacher will change. How will it change? In the face-to-face session, what do we do? Teachers need to motivate, provide one-to-one feedback. It's personal time with the students and counseling, because it's precious time face-to-face. There is progress tracking, of course, and some form of assessment as well. But a lot of it can be done online, even self-study, yeah, mobility, self-direction. Now, if I can refer to the paper by Professor Anelka, there are 9 features of Education 4.0. And Education 4.0 becomes the post-pandemic norm. That means there is no timetabling for language learning anymore. But I'll come back to that, okay? So hybridity and blendedness. Are we ready? Yeah, moving forward with blended learning, and where teacher and technology becomes partner. Human and machine becomes partner, with each having different roles, different but complementing. Yeah, different but complementing. Teachers in the classroom would provide all the motivation, and some of the materials are better provided by on the online platform. One of the very interesting paper on hybridity or hybrid learning, which is not new to the pedagogical landscape in Malaysia, but have received more attention and enhancement, especially post-pandemic. This study was done by Tan, Zakwan, and Aziz. They are from UTM. Very interesting. They are not in the language school. in the Graduate School of Business or their business school, 2002, entitled Recent Trends of Blended Learning and Flipped Classroom in Malaysia. They came to a conclusion that blended learning is very practical. It's practical in various disciplines, not just for their field, but also for language learning. But, however, independent curriculum and pedagogical redevelopment must be done to ensure that what we do is effective and efficient. So that is perhaps the next stage, which brings me to the second term or the third term. I've covered two. This is the third term, post-pandemic landscape, what is called the technology-enhanced learning. Now, we are very lucky, or at least because the plenary session supports a lot of what I say, I'll be saying when it comes to technology-enhanced learning. Because the prerequisite for effective blended and hybridity in language teaching and learning would mean an increased reliance on technology. So as teachers, are we prepared? Bearing in mind that our students are in fact the generation that are digitally savvy. So, as we know, technology has played an integral part in learning and teaching, both during the pandemic and currently. However, we note that pre-pandemic, language teachers are already accustomed to what we call technology use. We have call, we are familiar with the notion of CBLT, computer-based language teaching, and more recently, TEL. So instead of call and CBLT, we now say TEL, technology-enhanced language learning. So all this, we'll find that the literature reveals that technology use in the language education is quite diverse, ranging from well-established computer-based programs to relatively new tools and phone application. In this regard, this morning's paper, how many of you already have a chat GPT login? Okay, you'll see that maybe 60% of the room already have a chat GPT. What about our colleagues from PSU? Are you all using chat GPT? Okay, those who are presenting just now with on technology-based, digital-based papers have, I think, will be very familiar with it. So, I'm going to skip this. But come to this particular page, which is very interesting. Before we come to this one, today, today, the technologies available for language teaching and learning, I want to refer you to the paper written by Professor Anelka, include tools, SoundCloud, Audio Boost, Blubber, Magisto, TeachCamp, PictoChart, Canva, Twitter. Of course, some of them are social media platforms, Daigo, Scoop IT. Okay, some of them are not particularly just for what you call language teaching. They can be used for all disciplines. But basically, it requires the teachers to have, because with technology-enhanced teaching and learning, it requires the teachers to have 9 fundamental digital skills. And what are these digital skills? Record and edit audio clip. How many of you can do that? Just give yourself one pick. Create, annotate interactive and engaging video content. How many of you have done that? If you have, give yourself 1 point. Create visually engaging content. Wow, how engaging? Or just create engaging visual content. Can you, or have you done it? Give yourself a tick. Are you on social network with your students? Are you on social? Do you have any form of social networking? Connect, discover. Are you doing that? Do you have a blog? And are you using wikis to create participatory space? for your students. Of course, some of you are already using Moodle, and then within Moodle, you have that. Give yourself 1 point. Are you using social bookmarks or bookmarking? Now, this morning I interacted with a friend, with someone in the seminar. I think it's Stephen, who's doing on social e-social reader. Am I right? It's you. So I think there are 2 papers on social reading. So just like we share things, language learning is never a singular project. You always need to interact with someone else, whether it's the GPT that we interact with. So social bookmarking, social readers, all these kind of social softwares. Are you creating engaging presentation? Are you creating digital portfolios? Are you creating non-traditional quizzes? So if you have 9 of these fundamental skills, then you are really an instructor or a teacher that has these digital skills for language teaching and learning. Now, very interestingly, perhaps we can all learn from this University of Iowa, is that they have not just the tools, they also provide readiness training for the trainers, the teachers themselves. They invest in this. Do we in Malaysia appropriately or sufficiently so that our teachers and our professors and our lecturers are digitally savvy? Yeah. Or do we have to buy our own? When you have a ChatGPT account, do we have to use our own money? Or does the university already say, yes, ChatGPT is the way to go for all our students, they should be able to write and refer? Do we provide those kind of support? Now, University of Iowa has invested in this, and they have curated technology tools for language learning. So if you go to University of Iowa website, you can go to and use all these tools, yeah, whether it's for interpretative, interpersonal, or presentational. So all of this is available for the students and for the teachers. So my next slide will ask you whether you know this logo. So because this morning everyone has already seen it, so all educators, including language educators, have to come to terms with AI. So I can skip a lot of this because Prof. Anelka's session has already addressed it. She has shown us, for example, from the story of Si Tanggang, right, a short story on Si Tanggang, except that instead of using ChatGPT, I was using Google Bard, and somehow or other we compared the data, right? And Google Bard was slightly more accurate, but Google Bard just began, I think in May, early May, for people to use. Now, what is interesting is that there is a particular Diana Dovgobol. Yeah, she actually wrote a 6-minute paper on this artificial corner, which tells us how to use ChatGPT to learn a language and practice it. And she suggests, or she actually mentions at least 5 different things. Yeah, you can improve your vocabulary and so on, writing, reading skills, all with ChatGPT. And this is from her webpage. Use ChatGPT as a language partner. Yeah, you can actually use that. Are we already using it? We can simulate a real conversation because you show us not online, but you showed us the data and how they can become your language buddy and chat with you whenever you need some practice. Well, there's still no audio. You need to read. That is good because then you practice more reading. Secondly, you can use ChatGPT to learn grammar rules and improve your writing. Yeah, you can use ChatGPT to improve your vocabulary and reading skills. I'm not going to, but she provides some of the ways by which this is done. So again, I refer you to that particular discussion. And also finally, to use ChatGPT to improve your pronunciation. Yeah, because they provide you with ChatGPT can come back with what they call phonetic, and so on. So very interestingly, this AI is something that I believe, because it is related to technology enhanced learning instruction, or technology enhanced learning, and we see that post pandemic, the condition of hybridity, blendedness would have to include technology enhanced learning. Education 4.0 will become the norm. So we have to come to this. And finally, the fourth term for this for post-pandemic landscape is this notion of autonomous language learners. Again, all of us who are language teachers would know this is not new, right? But are we inculcating, ensuring that our learners are autonomous learners? That is the issue. That is where decision makers have to, the curriculum has to be changed. Have we changed I know UiTM has embarked on these changes in the curriculum, but there are, again, most of you are from UiTM, but there are universities that have not changed at all. The curriculum remains the same. Pandemic, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. The only thing that has changed is, well, instead of going online, we now go back to face-to-face. Can we do that? I think that would be a mistake, yeah? Because the fourth term, the natural correlate and natural outcome of hybridity, blendedness, and technology-enhanced learning is autonomous language learners. So much so, I believe that with the autonomous language learner, language teachers might not have a job. It's one of the jobs that might ultimately be replaced, because I can learn the language from what they call it, Rosario. Is that the software? There are multitudes. You go to TikTok, learn Japanese. TikTok, lesson 1 up to lesson 40, and they are all very brief, 2 minutes. And by the end of the 20 lessons, you can try it out, Prof. Ruzi, when you go to Japan. Is it January next year? You can try it out from the 20 hours or 20 TikTok lessons, whether you are able to find your way around Japan. So the focus on learner autonomy is brought about, I think, because, well, of course, autonomous learner and learner autonomy has always been the focus. The pandemic emphasized the importance of learner autonomy and self-directed learning. With the remote learning, students had to take responsibility for managing their time, setting their own goals, and assessing their resources, what to use and what not to use. Post-pandemic, we as teachers must continue to encourage the learners and our learners to develop independent learning strategies, self-assessment skills, self-motivation to maintain progress in their language learning journey. Autonomous language learning empowers the learners to take control of their language learning journey, promote active engagement, self-aware, and personalized learning experience. Now, as a reminder, some of the key characteristics of the autonomous language learners would include this self-direction. I think there was one paper today that discussed on whether students are aware of the learning outcomes. If they are aware of their learning outcomes, that is a plus point. So self-direction, they must take ownership of their own learning process, setting their own goals and deciding how to achieve them. Basically, students will have different learning objectives. Can we all have one learning outcome? I remember when learning outcomes was first introduced. Of course, MQA still uses learning outcome. Educators in the US, some of you are from the US, actually say learning outcomes is a deliberate dumbing of education in the United States. This was about 15, 20 years ago, when learning outcomes was first introduced by engineers. It was first introduced in engineering education. Well, self-direction is important for language learners. Resourcefulness, reflectiveness, independence, and finally, lifelong learning. These are some of the key features of the autonomous learners. So the autonomous learner empowers our learners. Now, in this regard, a particular study again on autonomous learning, learner autonomy and learning strategy used before and during the COVID-19 is worth examining in attempting to predict the post-pandemic landscape. Yeah? Perhaps we'll take autonomous learner more seriously, although it's first introduced again like technology. It's been used many times, many years. In brief, Ergatoglu found that the implementation of online learning is actually consistent with the requirement of the 21st century skills, education 4.0, including connectivity, teamwork, imagination, critical reasoning. Online-based English language learning provides students with flexibility and comfort. However, when students are not autonomous, so if they are not able, because we have heard anecdotal stories. Prof. Anelka, when we were discussing this morning, we have heard anecdotal stories that there are many students who are not able to adapt. They are not autonomous. So more and more, there is a percentage of students who do badly on online learning. Yeah. So much so that they have to be and we as teachers should be very much aware of this. Less effective. In fact, there is a story that was written. What's the name of the story, Professor? Mengapa perlu PDPR? Okay, for those who don't understand Malay, why is there a need for pembelajaran dalam apa? Pembelajaran dan pembelajaran di rumah. Why is that PDPR? PDPR means basically you learn at home, you stay at home, and you learn online. Now, very interestingly, there was a story written by, how old was this boy? 12 years old? 9 years old boy, Muhammad Fateh. Yeah, Muhammad Fateh wrote this story. And some of the comments or part of his story was so interesting. They've actually, part of his story was this. Everyone was on this Google Meet or whatever, and everyone could see. And this boy was interrupting the teacher all the time. Said, bila habis? Bila cikgu nak habis? You know, because it's very impersonal, but you can interrupt the teacher by typing into the chat box and so on. Why, you know, when are we going to finish our lesson? And so on. Well, the story is this. At the end of it, some students, you know, just don't want to be on that platform, on screen time. There's a paper on screen time as well, the effect of addictiveness to screen time for certain things. But there are students out there, who do not like screen time. I don't know, all of you with children or with grandchildren, you'll find nowadays your children either loves the iPad or wants to stay away from the iPad. I'm not sure what the reaction is. Now, the Igatoglu's study also found that lack of autonomy and language skills in online classes can create psychological distance, dissatisfaction, and also failure. In other words, they won't learn, especially those who are not used to online learning. We are lucky in the sense that 2006, we already have 90% already for online learning, since the main aspect of the language learning process are autonomy and the use of language learning strategies. Instead of a conclusion, I would like to offer you some caveat on the post-pandemic landscape, because I've been asked by the organizers to predict what post-pandemic language teaching would be like. I don't think there'll be anything new because the terms that we have are already there. Hybrid, blendedness, technology enhancement, autonomous learner. Now, the same conclusion actually has been reached by the rethinking language education after the experience of COVID. This is in the report. Yeah? So when we rethink our approach to language teaching, the basic principles are the same. You know, the basic principles are the same. This is from the excerpt is from the final report. Basically, we have to make sure that language teaching remain, or perhaps if it's not already learner-centered, we must make sure language teaching is learner-centered, not teacher-centered. It cannot be technology-centered as well. Okay, so it has to be the learners and how they use the technology, perhaps. And we have to prioritize action-oriented language along with formal and informal language learning. Now, again, there was a paper on the CEFR, the term action-oriented language or the action-oriented approach. Again, it's not new. It's in the CEFR. It's advocated there, one of the pillars of it. And of course, it goes back to communicative language teaching, the social constructivist approach, and more importantly, I think we have to make sure that the learners take the main role in the language learning. They have to be the one. And how do we ensure that? By giving them tasks. It's task-based that relates the classroom, the technology with the real world outside. Yeah, again, these words have to be translated into practice, and we need to be trained. A lot of us teachers need to be retrained for this, how to do this. And we have to make sure that the key role of affect, this is from the recommendation of the EU report, the selection of topics, learning activities for language learning. This is where the curriculum flexibility has to be there, especially if you are teaching a course like CWI 661, EWD 661, Zulina's paper today. You give them a template, fine, but also make sure that there is the role of effect when selecting topics and learning activities for the language learners, tailoring this to according to the interests, the age of the learners. And all these need to be adaptive. It needs to be, if you like, flexible. So apart from that, we also require urgent action to address our learning gaps, the digital gap, or even the digital literacy, depending on the context that we are in, and ensure that smooth and continued education pathways exist for all our learners. We all come from different situations, different contexts. Of course, teachers have always complained about this. So over the longer term, our systems will need to be strengthened, and will need to strengthen learners and teachers' resilience. That's why the Olympic ring, going faster, jumping higher, and perhaps stronger. Fostering environments of hybridity in which individuals have the competencies required to reach their full potential and a high degree of autonomous learning skills and strategies. Now, to that end, this talk on acclimatizing language learning and teaching in the post-pandemic landscape is optimistic that in a short period of time, within our lifetime, we have shown the resilience and adaptability to the technology, the methodology, and also the implementation, the pedagogics of hybridity in this post-pandemic landscape. So with that, thank you very much. And Once again, I hope all of you the take-home point today is if you are into hybrid learning, blended learning, technology-enhanced learning, autonomous learners, all these will become very, very important. So thank you again, and I'll hand it back to Lisa.
Thank you very much, Professor, for enlightening us with said speech, a very engaging speech, I might add. Your expertise and insights have certainly expanded our understanding on the pertinent topic of language learning and teaching post-pandemic. Esteemed guests and audience, as we bring this keynote and innovation with us beyond this conference, may the insights gained here fuel our